If you don't know me, my name is Jeff Whitehead. I'm the COO of the George A. Romero Foundation. I want to say, oh, thank you. Oh, that's very kind. These are our friends. I did want to say on behalf of Suze, who is very sad to not be here, she has some personal things going on, welcome to our panel, and please come and visit us in Hall A, where we have all sorts of exciting things, including some books that Adam Hart wrote about George from his time working in the archive with Ben. And so I'm sure that you'll get some really interesting insight into some of the things that Adam found in the archive while they were going through all of the materials. And you'll hear from Ben a little bit later about some of the other things that are in the archive itself. I'm going to give you some updates, as we haven't talked in about a year out here, for all the things that we did since last we saw each other. First and foremost, we actually finished the completion of a film called Expostulations, which is a little known film of George's. We have one segment that was remaining, and it was a silent film that is pre-Night of the Living Dead, showcasing the Black experience in Pittsburgh in the early 1960s. And so we actually have that. We finished it in the way the production team had envisioned, with a poem by the late Richard Ricci, as well as some jazz music to accompany, and we hope to be able to show that to audiences by the end of this year or next. And so a really nice project to have finished. As you know, we try to do some completionism of George's work, so everything that we find that we have, we try to put out into the world so that people can enjoy it. We've also started and have continued a really meaningful relationship with an organization out of Canada called Film Camp in a Box. And when we do our fundraiser this year, as you may know, and I hope you do, one of our primary impeti is to put cameras into the hands of young people so that we can work on creating the next generation of filmmakers. And so Film Camp in a Box does just that. It is a weekend intensive program where you get everything that you need to create a film in a box, shipped to your house. You work in small teams to be able to go ahead and make a short film throughout the space of 4 or 5 days. What we're going to be doing this year is trying to fund a lot of those kits in western and northwestern Pennsylvania so that we can continue to provide access. So as we've talked about up at our tables upstairs, the funds that we raise at LDW and other places all go towards scholarship, mentorship, and other projects like that. And we'll actually be using a lot of this revenue for this year to push into Film Camp in a Box so that we can start to cultivate the next generation of filmmakers. We're very, very excited about that. For those of you who've been with us for a few years, you'll know also that we released the amusement park as one of the very first major projects of the foundation. And we then turned our attention to an adaptation into graphic novel form, and that will actually come out toward the end of this year or early next. And so we'll be doing some fun stuff on that front. And we have a whole lot of really interesting screenwriting and screenwriting development programming coming up toward the end of this year as well. As last year, we did celebrate George as a screenwriter, and our fundraiser has gone towards building some programming therein. And so we're very excited to be releasing that throughout the summer and into the early fall. So I have a couple of people with me, I think all of whom you probably know. The first to my immediate right is Captain Britain, otherwise known as Colin Corcoran, who is a representative and in fact heads up our GARF global efforts. I'll have him speak to that in just a second. And then we have Matt Blazi, who is one of the hosts of our GARF network, and then several shows therein. And then we have Ben Rubin, who runs the Horror Studies Archive. And we'll be going on a round robin here doing a little Foundation and Friends variety show for you to talk about some of the things that we've got going on, starting with Colin. So Colin, why don't you tell us what you're up to on GARF Global?
Thank you, Jeff, much appreciated. Well, what I can tell you is that obviously we know that George even, had a lot of fans of his work outside of the United States, and that was sort of talked about with me back in, I think it was about 2020, and I've been involved with the foundation ever since then. We've since grown to have ambassadors in the UK, which is myself, France, Italy, Canada. I'm always looking to grow and get further and wider. We're talking with a guy in Australia at the moment, so we're really looking to spread our wings out and get the good word as far out there as best as we can. Well, what we do is we keep an eye on events and things that we think the foundation would be noticed in a good way in this territory. So in the UK, for instance, we have a number of horror convention events, and I will represent the GARF at those events, either on a vending table or by networking, as we do at these events, and then that gets us on the radar of some nice institutions out in the territories that we operate in, so the UK, France and Italy, probably. Japan, of course, as well. I've got to mention Norman out in Japan. Norman's a big Dawn fan, and he's flying that flag and the foundation flag out in Japan. So we are really global in that respect, which is really very, very good. In terms of projects for the UK, when we're not attending events and spreading the good word and networking as we do for the future, we tend to find very good and specialist horror creators out in these realms, and that might be that they can create some artwork for us, maybe they can create some visuals for us, and even some tasty condiments. We've done collaborations with people who create artwork for t-shirts, for posters. We've created collaborations with people who can get us guests through podcasts, and then we can speak to those guests and understand how their impact and what George's influence was on those guys. And then we can bring you merchandise out from sources. We did a hot sauce collaboration with a very, very good horror fan in the UK, and that allowed us to sort of understand a side of George maybe we didn't know, because we consulted with Suze about what George would like in the respect of this sauce, what flavours he would like, what spice level he might like. So, when we talk about George's films all the time, and his life and his work, now we know, what hot sauce he might like. So I think, and you can catch up on our events. We look to contribute to the GARF Global newsletter, which comes out every couple of months. There's always a GARF Global update in there. So if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing beyond these sunny shores of the US, definitely subscribe to the GARF newsletter if you haven't already, and you'll see more about our adventures and what exciting stuff we have coming up.
Thanks, Colin. Before I turn it over to Matt, I want to reflect a little bit on a question that somebody asked me at the table today, and that was, what is my favorite LDW moment of all time? And I'll answer that, because I've been coming out here since the foundation was founded, despite, of course, the hiatus, or without the hiatus for COVID. And it's always about the people that we get to meet. And we've met some really incredible people, not least of which is Gene Blair, who's floating around here taking embarrassing pictures of me somewhere. I met him, there he is up there, say hey Gino. We met Gino in the audience at one of these, and he said, look, we have this idea up here in Sharon, Pennsylvania, to make this little short film and empower people who don't usually have a chance to do the type of work that we want them to be able to do. So he said, okay, so let's take a look at what this is all about. And we were able to make a little short film with Gino to help out, one, his career, but also the people with whom he was surrounded, including individuals with disabilities, individuals who would have been culturally, historically disenfranchised from film. And I'm really happy to say that we finished that film, and it actually just had its screening in Sharon last week, 2 weeks ago, and we actually were able to do it as part of a film showcase at the Salem Horror Fest as well. So a lot of really interesting traction on that too. It's in film festivals right now, and we'll have it open for viewing as soon as the festival circuit closes. So you never know who you're going to meet at these places. That is always my reflection on my favorite moments when I come to LDW, and I hope that you'll all come up and hang out with us a little bit after we're done here, get to know each other a little bit, so we can hopefully do some fun things with you too. So Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about the network, where it came from, what you're up to, you and Eric, and you can chat a little bit about Night of the Creeps and Creep Show with them.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Matt Blazi. I am co-host of GARF 247 on the GARF network with Eric Kent. Eric could not be here this weekend. But back in 2020, Jeff and Suze approached us because Eric and I had been doing a George Romero-centric podcast celebrating George's work and talking about a lot of the things that don't get talked about. And we joined the GARF. And right at the height of the pandemic, we were all at home, we were on Zoom a lot, and we decided that we really want to celebrate independent horror that we grew up loving, that's been timeless and classic, but also celebrating a lot of the newer independent films that are coming out, with Shudder, Screenbox, really taking the lead on independent film and really bringing a lot of classic horror into our homes. We wanted to really start to celebrate that, and the best thing about that is our format is very open and relaxed. We don't want to talk about the same things that you can go and find on any other YouTube video or Blu-ray documentary. We really want to get into some of the untold stories about the production, or things that maybe a director has never gotten to talk about but has always wanted to talk about. So we want to celebrate their entire career, and in 2021 we did a month-long celebration of George's Night Riders, which was one of the best things because we really got a lot of good stories from the cast and crew with Tasso and Tom and Warner and Chris, and we ended the run with Ed Harris. And listening to Ed Harris talk about his love and reverence for George is one of the best things that we've done on the network, because that man is known worldwide, but he started his career in two of George's most popular films, and to hear him talk about these stories really helps endear fans to George and some of these works, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to spotlight the newer films that are coming out on these streaming services or straight to disc. And being straight to disc now is not a bad thing. It's a way to get these movies into people's homes that you may not know about. So we want to take an opportunity to give them a platform to talk about their movies and their careers, whether it's a new director or a director that's decided to do some smaller projects and focus on those. The fun thing is that it is just a conversation. We don't want to interview them. We want to talk to them about this. And I feel that is a strength that we have, because we want to talk about their work, but always it's always relatable to George in some way. There's always a way for us to connect it back to George. And there's times where we get very George-centric on our shows, where Eric and I want to get in the weeds and talk about some of the Romero stuff that people have been asking us to cover. And we're always open to hearing people tell us what they want to see. It can be kind of a fan-led programming. There's stuff out there that maybe Eric and I don't see, and we'd love to hear feedback from listeners and friends that what's popular, what do you see out there that we could cover and on the GARF network, and really get some new content out there. And we have the Horror X is the other show on the GARF network. That's our female-led show, which has been fantastic. If you haven't tuned in, check us out on YouTube. All of our stuff is up there. At least once or twice a day, I get an email about a comment on a video we did 3-4 years ago, and it's amazing that they still have some longevity. And it's always nice to go back every few years and maybe get a chance to talk to someone that we didn't talk to on a big anniversary. But it's really about celebrating independent horror and George Romero. Those two things go hand in hand. George was one of the masters of independent filmmaking and influenced so many people. And to find out what about his work influenced a new generation, and how are they building on that, and also how are they trying to change it? What are their ideas? What boundaries are they looking to push? What are they trying to do to change our opinion of certain films or cliches or genres? So we tend to lean into that, and we can get into the weeds because sometimes it's fun to hear about the nitty-gritty of how something was shot and done, and go long form on it. And then we get off on tangents. We did a My Bloody Valentine show that was 3.5 hours long. We had to do a second show the next week because the director kept inviting people on our show. So we had to do 7 hours of My Bloody Valentine when it turned 40, which was hands down one of the easiest shows I had to do, because Eric and I just showed up and the cast and crew just took off. And we just sat there and listened to these friends who have been friends for 40 years just talk and laugh and have a good time and reminisce. That's what we love to do. And when we get a big cast group in there, it's the easiest job because they just start talking to each other. Or sometimes we get people that tune into the show that worked on the movie and we invite them on. So it's a very fluid kind of concept. We don't like to be structured in a box, but we'll go with the flow. But we are working on our July show for another independent film. And we got a couple feelers out there for probably some old friends and some new friends, working with folks at stuff like Screenbox and Shudder, because there's a lot of great stuff out there that we keep hearing about. And we want to talk to these folks and give them that platform to share their film and to help keep them motivated. We want to see them do more stuff, because there's so much out there. We're never going to watch it all, but we're all going to try, and we're going to try to talk to as many people as we can.
Thanks, Matt. So Ben's turn now to give us some pearls of wisdom about the archive.
Yeah, so I'm to represent the archive at the University of Pittsburgh's library system. So I curate our horror studies collections. This includes the George A. Romero archival collection, and then we've expanded it considerably over the past 5 years. We have a lot of author papers, magazines, rare books. We have a script archive that is not just tied to any one particular creator. So kind of a good piece for our theme is we do have a very early first draft Creeps, at that time just called The Creeps, but Night of the Creeps script. And this collection serves not just to preserve the history of horror, but really help illuminate that creative process so that, you know, we see the final film, read the final novel, maybe we get some DVD commentary, you get a con like this where people try to reminisce or reflect back on something they did 45 years ago. But these documents can really show like what happened at that time. And so we've seen lots of people coming in and do research on this. As Jeff mentioned at the GARF table, we have a book by a scholar named Adam Hart. He worked with me for 2 years, and he wrote a book kind of on some of his impressions, what he learned, new perspectives about George from the archive that are things that nobody had access to prior to 5 years ago. And it's just barely scratches the surface. So his book is a great first step in starting to learn more, but there's still a lot to be had. But with our theme today, I wanted to just point out a couple of these things that we can learn from this that are part of the creative process. And so I think maybe I'll start with the non-Romero film and some of the things that are in the original Creep script. It is probably would have been about 20 minutes longer than the film that we end up seeing, and it does have the original ending that is now at least on the director's cut of the home video release. For people who saw it in the theater or saw the VHS, there are different endings, but the sort of ending where Tom Atkins' character comes out as a burnt husk of a corpse and falls off, and the creeps fly out of his brain to go attack the cemeteries in the original ending. Also at the very beginning of the film, there's a much longer sequence in the 50s in which we actually see them take the body of Johnny to the cryogenics lab as they try to figure out what was going on with this guy, because he's just dead. He's not been attacked by the axe murderer. And they decide, oh, well, if we cryogenically freeze him, everybody in the future will be able to figure this out. So they kind of give you all this backstory of why he's in this university basement freezer that we don't see. Because he's here, I asked Fred Decker about this, and he did not remember that at first at all, writing it. And then he remembered that they may have actually filmed it, but it seemed too extraneous and didn't help the plot, so they cut it out. So we see these sort of like, how does this evolution happen? It's also written exactly as you see the film. It's very jokey. He writes asides to himself of like, oh, you thought that was the end, but it's a horror movie, and more's coming. And these things that seem to entertain himself. And then in Creepshow and Creepshow 2, I think, people know some of the stories about these. Creepshow was written by Stephen King. This is really, I think, his second foray into trying to write a screenplay. He's a prose guy. He wrote this as a prose script. It needed a lot of work, but he's adapting some of his own work and creating new work. The stories that he adapted, The Crate and Weeds, remain some of his most obscure stories and are extremely hard to find in the original form. They're both published in men's magazines. They're almost impossible to find. They're way, way more dark. They were not written in the EC style that he did film in. The last segment is interesting because it actually is just, our mogul is just a rich guy in a penthouse in New York. He's not in this weird futuristic hermetically sealed home. He just lives in the penthouse. He doesn't talk to people through the television. They come up and inspect his house, and then he throws them out and won't pay them. It's spiders, not cockroaches. I'm gonna guess maybe Greg just Tom couldn't get a whole basket of spiders released in the CMU. So it plays out a lot different. And then in Creepshow 2, we really see these segments that we know, I think a lot of fans know were dropped. So Pinfall, which was kind of zombies bowling, and Cat from Hell that ends up in Tales from the Dark Side. So these were projects that were meant to be, we should have seen 5 segments, we only ended up with 3. Some for budgetary reasons, some were for special effects we couldn't do. But they all still have this feel of both Stephen King and George Romero, which is interesting, because King wrote his first script and George interpreted King's work. They're just beginning to be friends here in 1979. By 1984, now you've got King trying to write King's stories. They're much better friends, but they're trying to reinterpret each other's work in this interesting way where you can see that they're friends. They also have the same influences. Pinfall is very much in line with King and Romero. If you need the rebels, go to Easy Rider, throw a guy in a motorcycle and a jean jacket and you're good to go. So all these kind of come out and you can see this creative process. So I think it's important, if you're really interested in that, or if you want a career in filmmaking and screenwriting, to think about looking at an archive, because it shows you what these people that we consider masters of the genre, how they went through that process. You know, George Romero didn't go to film school. He learned how to do this, and we can see that traced through this archive, exactly how it was done, and hopefully it can be inspiration for the future of independent filmmaking.
Thanks, Ben. I think before we open for any questions, I want to remind everyone and acknowledge a few people. The foundation itself, as you may know, is an all-volunteer organization. Born and bred for the passion of horror, as well as keeping the memory of George alive. And so everything that we do as volunteers so that we can push the next generation of filmmakers, as well as restoration and preservation projects. And that couldn't be done without all of the volunteers that we have, including everybody on the stage with us today. Gino, who you heard me mention, is hanging out back there. Say hi, Gino. We're also joined in the front by Michelle, who's our global ambassador from Canada. Say hi, Michelle. And of course, our illustrious treasurer and secretary of our board, Ramona, who I promised I would not make sing and dance, but might anyway, just to say hello. And so I want to thank them as well. All of the work that we do always returns to future filmmakers and the people that we really care about. And we really thank the support that you provide to us in our ability to be able to do that. And so without further ado, I'll open it up to you if you have any questions for any of us about the foundation, about what we do globally, about the network, about the archive, or anything else that may be on your mind. We're here to answer them.
I've talked to most of you individually. I was at the archive last year to read some of the scripts and some of the material that's there. And I'm just curious how much of a push there is right now to take some of the unproduced material and work with the foundation to try to find a way to get some of it actually made, because there's so much of it that's in there. And if you could just talk a little bit about that, and sort of like if there's any projects in the horizon or anything like that.
I can start on that and talk about some of the work that Dan Krause has been doing to finish George's unreleased novel, including a novel that will come out this fall, as well as some of the things that, and you know, as a foundation, we don't own the rights to the films. They're all owned by the individual rights holders. And the projects that are in the archive that are unproduced are owned by the people that were working with George or the estate at the time that was happening. And so yes, some of those things are garnering interest, as you might imagine, and we may see some more George projects coming out, including things like the Dan Krause novels. And so we'll have over time, I think, some continued interest in mining what is there. And you know, the archive being public, you can read these unproduced scripts, which are fascinating and amazing to do, and you connect with Ben to do that. But the rules all still apply. And so even though it may be unproduced, you still have to go through the folks who do own the rights that time period and find the financing and determine to make the film. One of the folks who's sitting over here actually did a bit of work with the archive and around town and in various other places. This is Brandon, who is actually, you know, right now releasing a documentary about the unproduced Resident Evil film. And so it was really interesting. I spent some time with Brandon up in Salem. Got to see a good piece of the film. I'll be looking forward to seeing the rest of it, because I learned a lot based on the research that he did, the work with the archive, and work around with the interviews of people that were part of the project to see what might have been. And so there's a lot of that in the archive too, projects that may have found financing at a different time Some things, and I'll have Ben tell some of the, some of his favorite stories, if you will, about what's in there that wasn't produced. There's one in particular that I can't believe didn't get produced. And so, Ben, what's been your experience on people's interest on that front?
I mean, because we don't own the rights, people ask, could these be produced? And it's, I don't know, talk to Suze and whoever else. So I think, of course, there are people that would like to do that. We don't have the capacity at the library. It's not our role. So I can't say, as people ask what they end up doing when they follow up later, other than Dan Krause, because I know what he did with it, or other than Brandon. Also, I think what we see is, there's two different ways to kind of approach what's in that archive. And when you see all these unproduced projects or, earlier versions of a script, is that there's one thing that if you want to pursue actually making a film out of an idea that George left behind, versus the sort of that's that creative versus that analytic kind of more academic approach, where then you kind of have free reign. If you want to talk about and analyze the ideas that he had, that's academic freedom, that's free reign, all of that is there for the taking. That's a little bit what Adam started to do, is talk about what are some of these themes. George only wrote one other screenplay that had zombies in it, and it was a contract work for Resident Evil. Otherwise, he didn't write zombie screenplays. So, we could look at his science fiction plays, science fiction works that he was writing. We can look at the westerns, the dramas, all the other forms of horror, universal plastics that he was reimagining. All this kind of tells us who he was as a person. And so there's that piece of it that is, I think, also there of how do we understand him more as an artist through his writing, even if it doesn't mean you're trying to make that writing come back to life. You're using it to understand him. And so I think those are two different approaches and two different ways to kind of think about how any archive, any creative literary archive, tell what they tell us about a creator and what do we do with it.
I noticed the post that you made recently for the movie Stay that is being worked on right now, and I was just wondering if anyone's involved with that, or if you could talk about where that's at in the process and sort of what it's about and everything.
So yeah, it's finished, and Gino is the director. He's hanging right back there. He'd be a good person for you to talk to. I met him here at a panel just like this, and the audience would have heard me say this already, but the wonderful thing about these things is the people that you meet. And so we started talking about what he did. He was working with individuals with special needs, had carved this niche for himself on filmmaking, was interested in bringing a script forward to include a lot of people who would not have otherwise been able to be included in filmmaking. And so we did. So we made this really beautiful little short film, which is really about teen suicide and depression, that moonlights in a Dickensian sort of fever dream, which has been it was really fun. The folks that we work with, including Suze, did just a terrific job, and it actually has an appearance by Laurie Cardill. And so there's a lot of people that are working with the foundation who lent a hand to Gino to help make that film into a reality. It's finished. We did its first screening up in Salem last month, or in April, I think. And we did a screening up in Sharon in May, and right now it's in a festival circuit. So as soon as we are finished with the festival circuit, we'll release it so that the public can have a look.
Ask Matt if you can tell us anything about your new book yet.
Matt's long-awaited new book. Come on, Matt, here we go.
It is just in the conceptualization phase. I just kind of came up with it a few weeks ago, but after I wrote 8 Days in the Woods, everyone kept asking me about the next one, and I kind of pigeonholed myself on trying to do the same thing with another movie. And there's a lot of movies I'm passionate about. There's a lot of movies that I think have great stories, but it was, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? So a lot of you people that do know me know that movie locations are a big thing for me. And I love to go and visit a movie location and take 400 pictures at different angles of a house just to get every shot. So I decided that that's a big hobby. There's a lot of people out there that do this a lot, and a lot more than me, and a lot better than me. And I figured that the movie location hobby is something that is growing because we've got Buffalo Bill's house here. It's an Airbnb. You can go stay in Buffalo Bill's house and have a great time. The Short Circuit house in Oregon is an Airbnb. You can go there and have a great time. I'm a big Short Circuit fan. I can't wait to go there and stay. The Goonies house has been purchased by a fan and is now more fan-friendly and more fan-accessible. So as this hobby continues to grow and our nostalgia, because nostalgia is a hell of a drug, and we want to chase that high of watching that movie and going to where it was and sleeping in that room, it's become a business. And there's some apps out there, there's lots of great blogs and YouTube channels and websites that have really latched onto this. And I think that there is a lot of meat on that bone for film location tourism. So I've started working with one of the apps. They are going to help collaborate with me. And I'm just kind of fleshing out the stories that I want to tell, what the hobby is about, and why it's important. It's not just important for the fans, the businesses that benefit from it. The Monroeville Mall. I mean, how many posts do we see every week about making it to their Mecca? This is sometimes a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for people. And we keep coming back because it's great here. We love it. Evans City is another one. Blairstown, New Jersey has really embraced it. Burkittsville, Maryland has become more of an open and welcoming destination for the Blair Witch fans. The Exorcist Steps. So think about all these big locations that have really come in the last 10 years and started to embrace their history and their heritage as part of American pop culture and cinema, where it brings people in from all over the world. So it's the big question of why. Why do fans do it? What are the businesses doing? And how does that affect the industry? So I've started to work on that a little bit and flesh it out. I'm going to hopefully start working on it soon.
Very fun. And if you're interested, the Buffalo Bill House booth is right around the corner from ours, upstairs in Hall A. My guy back here says no, but I think all of you will say yes. So come on up and have a look, get to know those folks too, because it is a really interesting part of our community. I think we probably have time for one more question before we cede the stage. Go ahead, my guy.
You guys help with things like the amusement park?
We did, yeah. It was one of the first major projects of the foundation, yes.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And do you do documentaries on George as well?
So some of our friends do. We have not done any, but Brandon, who did one on Resident Evil, and some of our other friends have done some things as well, based on work in the archive. If you come up by our table, another friend of ours, Adam Hart, just wrote a book on a lot of the unproduced materials that are in the archive. And so the answer to that is yes, the archive has now been used to develop and produce really interesting things. But we haven't done any documentaries ourselves as a foundation. We did, though, as you correctly say, help restore and release the amusement park, which is now available on Shudder, and hopefully people will get a chance to see it. And we'll have some other smaller projects of that ilk coming out within the next year or two.
How did that come to be?
The amusement park? So we knew that it existed, and there were 3 reels of it that we knew. Collected them, determined which one was going to be the best to use, and then worked with Indie Collect out of New York to get it into the shape that it's in now, to make sure that the sound quality was good, and the picture quality, which is vastly better than it was, met mostly modern standards. I mean, it was shot, for those of you who don't know, the amusement park, it was shot more or less as a public service announcement on Asia. And so shot for television, and so the specs are television specs. And so we were concerned about blowing it up to a big screen as well, which we managed to do without too much difficulty. And then we worked through the entire process of restoring it, reconstructing all of the rights. For those of you who were here earlier, I answered the question about rights. Had to document to either dead ends or to rights holders to make sure we were good on music rights, people, image rights, all of those things. And then worked with our friends at Shudder to release it. And it was about an 18-month process, which is short for filmmaking sometimes, but a lot of the time was actually spent making sure we had crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's to make sure it was legitimized to release to the world.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. In case you're interested, somebody heard me talk about it earlier, we actually did an adaptation for graphic novel, which will come out next year as well. So the artist who did that adaptation is our friend Ryan Carr, who does a lot of our art for us. He's one of our our tried and true, our resident artist, and you'll probably see and have seen some of the art he's done on his Facebook and other social media pages. I'm really happy to say that he's coloring it now, and so it's in its final stages before release, which hopefully will be, some 8-9 months from now. So you get to enjoy it in another medium too. All right, thanks everybody. Come and see us in Hall A. Thanks for coming this weekend. We'll see you out there.